So back in March, I purchased the XF56mm f1.2 or WR version, and in today's video I just want to share with you my short-term review of the lens. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Thierry Gibralta. I'm a full-time photographer and videographer based in Tokyo, Japan, and I shoot primarily with Fujifilm gear. So first let's talk about the size, weight and handling of the lens. Well, this lens comes at 445 grams, which is quite substantial for a Fujifilm lens. Fujifilm lenses are known to be quite compact. It's also the case for this one because it's a 75mm equivalent focal length on full frame. Still compact, but definitely you feel the weight and the size of it. However, when you put it on your camera, like let's say the X-T5 that I have right here, you can see that the lens is completely usable and is okay to basically handle easily. Now, on the X-T5 right now, I do have the small rig cage, the retro cage, just because I enjoy the bigger handle and also the retro look. But overall, if you have the X-T5 as is, it's also okay to handle this lens. The good thing about this lens is that the aperture ring is solid. It feels really solid and not easy to turn. Much better than on the 18mm f1.4. It's a bit tighter. The focus ring is also good. It's smooth, and I think that when it comes to focus by wire, that's kind of like the best you can get on the Fujifilm system. Now, one thing that I don't like about this lens though is that whenever I store it or whenever I don't need the lens hood, if you put the lens hood back onto your lens, you don't have access to the aperture ring anymore, which is kind of an annoying aspect because when I shoot for my clients, I shoot a lot of portraits. If I don't need the lens hood, I have to just put it somewhere. I cannot just leave it on the camera, which is extra work and extra things to think about for me, right? So most of the time, I just grab the lens like this and put it in a jacket or whatever, and that's how I transport it. I barely use the lens hood. Okay, so now let's talk about the autofocus capabilities of the lens. This lens doesn't feature linear motors, which are basically the fastest autofocus system that you can have on Fujifilm, meaning that the autofocus system is slower than, let's say, on the 33mm f1.4, but is way better for the people who are more OG and have used the older version of the 56mm f1.2. It is way better than the previous version. The reason why I sold the previous version of the 56mm f1.2, the non-WR version, is because of its autofocus. Every time I was shooting with it, it was always hunting a lot. For video, it was basically unusable, and the focus was pretty much not working for me. But this version is actually working. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. In fact, the Fujifilm system overall has autofocus issues here and there, right? But it's good enough for me to get results with my clients walking around or, you know, like dancing a little bit or even running kind of slowly, not too fast, right? This is not a sports lens, but it's good enough for me to get this kind of results. Now, in terms of noise, I would say that the autofocus produces slight noises, but it's not extremely important anyway. I assume that if you are going to shoot with this focal length, 75mm equivalent, right? You're not gonna record sound on the camera, you're gonna record externally most of the time, so this should not be an issue anyway. And before I continue with the video, I just started my newsletter where I will publish once to twice a week articles about Fujifilm gear, but not only Fujifilm gear, also other brands, as well as tutorials or maybe some blogs about Japan and destinations that are interesting to photograph. So if you want to know more about those articles, and also if you want to know when those videos are published, because YouTube don't always show them to all the subscribers, right? Then make sure to subscribe to the newsletter, and yeah, I'll see you in the newsletter also with written versions of this particular video. Now let's talk about the image quality produced by this lens. Whenever I have a portrait session and I want a picture that will just wow my client, this is the lens that I will use. Why? Because of the compression effect and the bokeh that it produces. The quality is just amazing, right? You get basically a creamy bokeh with really round aspects without onion rings. That feels very clean, and that is just amazing, right? The subject matters also really pop out of the picture, and it really kind of feel, I don't know, like very, very special in terms of image when you look at the images produced by this lens compared to other lenses like the 18 or the 33. Now the colors that you get out of it, the contrast, the non-existent chromatic aberrations, everything works with this lens. You also barely have any vignetting even at f1.2, and honestly the lens has just stellar image quality. Oftentimes I find myself shooting at 1.4, f2, not because the f1.2 is not good in terms of image quality, but because by stepping down a little bit I can get a little bit more in focus, so I would rather step down for that. But at f1.4 as well, you can get great results, and you can really focus on a really tiny aspect of the image. Now for videographers who want to use this lens for video, well, I'll also use this lens a couple of times for events as well as for clients, and I do have to say that it performed really well. Now, it is sometimes hunting a little bit, especially if you go from the closest point of focus to the furthest, but overall, if the tracking is in place, if the subject is clearly defined, right, the lens doesn't have any issue focusing on it, and I had some good results in video using this lens. So I'm pretty satisfied with the result that I had with it, and I can definitely say that, yeah, this one I can use for video, which is definitely not the case with the f1.2R non-WR version of the older generation of this lens. Now, this lens is not cheap at all though. It comes at $999, right? So almost $1,000. Let's be realistic here with $1,000. Is it worth it? Well, that definitely depends on your budget. For me, I purchased this lens because I needed it for my portrait sessions. It's a good compromise when it comes to focal length and having enough compression, but also having enough space to be able to shoot my clients depending on the environment, right? I don't want to have to go too far away, which is kind of the case with the 90mm f2, which is another great portrait lens, by the way. So is it worth it? It totally depends, but for my use case where I make money out of it, yeah, it's definitely worth it. And I can only recommend it. It's a great lens, beautiful image quality, beautiful bokeh. Nothing bad that I can say about it, except maybe the fact that, yeah, you have this little lens cap here that I can't use my aperture ring, which is kind of a shame to me. So 4-star ring is not the best. But apart from that, great lens overall. Alright, so let me know down in the comment if you have any questions about this lens, if you like the pictures that I created with it, and again, if you want to have a written version of this video where I go a little bit more in depth and you have access to the sample pictures that I took with this lens, then make sure to have a look at the blog article and subscribe to my newsletter. I'll see you in the next video.